Good morning, students. I'm Shashikant Patil, your English teacher, welcomes you in this class 11 video lecture. Today, we are going to revise the summary of the lesson, The Portrait of a Lady, written by the famous writer Khushwant Singh. The story is very much interesting. Now, which lady is talking about? What is the special of that lady? That is going to be very interesting. Let us see here. What we are going to see here is that, yes, what is that? The summary of the lesson, A Portrait of a Lady by Khushwant Singh. See, it is the first chapter of the book Hornbill. It is written by Khushwant Singh. Let us see something about writer Khushwant Singh. You can see this photo. Khushwant Singh is a very celebrated author, magazine editor, newspaper editor, and a novelist. He has been a prolific record. He was a very lively person in his lifetime and had a tremendous kind of connection with masses as well as classes. Now, alongside that, the lady about whom he is talking is none other than his grandmother. And see her photo. She is also an old lady. So, the portrait of a lady means the character sketch of his grandmother. See, everybody of us is having the fond memories of her grandmother. But here, the writer Khushwant Singh has tried to elaborate the characteristic of his grandmother. His grandmother was a very typical woman. She was having some religious values, she was having some strong human values, and that is what he has depicted. We are lucky that Khushwant Singh has properly narrated a character, and through his grandmother, we also identify our own grandmother. And grandchildren have a very strong connection with their grandmother or grandparents. So this lesson will be very interesting one. So let us go into details there. Now, what is that? The Portrait of a Lady summary. The chapter, The Portrait of a Lady, is the story of the author and his grandmother. It means that this is not the work of fiction or an imaginative work. No. Here, writer is very much clear that he's talking about his own grandmother. The grandmother was an old woman with a wrinkled face. The author had always seen her like this for the past 20 years. She appeared to be so old that he could not imagine her being young and pretty. Here, what happens when a person becomes old, thereafter, no physical changes happen, and whatever the kind of things. So, right from his childhood, at that time, he might have seen his grandmother 75 years old. So, she was having a wrinkled face. So, you can't believe that once upon a time, she might have been young and she might have got married also and had children also. Because as a child, Khushwant Singh has seen her as that only, and even next 20 years, he could see the same kind of grandmother. What was her? Someone who had a husband. He can't imagine that she might have got married, but that was the reality actually. Her grandmother was married, and then writer's father was her son. So all these things are there, but as a child, Khushwant Singh could not adjust himself with this imagination. She was short, fat, and slightly bent. The author had seen his grandmother portrait. There was a photograph, an old man with a turban. There was a portrait of his grandfather in their house who was having the turban. Turban, that is what we wear. The Punjabi people wear on their head. It protects from different kinds of things, from sun, from rain, and from some attacks also. And long white beard covering his chest. So his father had this kind of get-up. To the author, his grandfather didn't seem like a man who could have a wife and children. So when he looks at the photograph of his grandfather, even then he said that how can this man ever be married? But someone who could have lots of grandchildren, directly he could have grandchildren. These are the writer's thoughts of imagination. His grandmother used to move around the house. What happens? Around house in spotless white. She used to wear white clothes only. And what kind of white? Spotless white, very clean and neat. With her one hand resting on her waist, means she was bending like this, and her other hand counting the beads of rosary. Beads of rosary, what we say mala, and she was counting those beads of rosary and taking the names of God. This is very interesting feature here. So in short, what he introduces that his grandmother was very old and his grandfather photo is also very old. So as a child, Khushwant Singh cannot imagine that they ever would have been young and got married and had children. But the reality is that once upon a time, his grandmother and grandfather were young also. They had married also and they had children also. This is what is there. Let's go further. In the initial days, the author and his grandmother had a good relationship. What happened? His father was posted in a city, so writer was kept with his grandmother. So he and his grandmother are having a very good relationship. She used to wake him up and get him ready to school. She used to pack the things required for him for the day and walk him to school every day. She used to visit the temple that was attached to the school. She had a routine of reading the scriptures. The author, along with the children, sat on the veranda singing alphabets and morning prayers. They both used to come back home together with the stray dogs roaming around them as his grandmother would carry the stale chapatis to feed them. Here, as writer tells us that the memories of his childhood. Writer's father was posted in city, so that's why they took some time to settle over there. So by that time, the writer was kept with his grandmother. So they were sharing the bond of companionship. Every morning, the grandmother would prepare her grandchild and they would go to the temple. Alongside the temple, there was a school. So by the time the writer would take the lessons of alphabets, the grandmother would sit in a temple and read the scriptures and everything. While coming back, stray dogs would chase them. And the writer's grandmother, as they would carry the stale chapatis, they used to feed. This character shows that, what it shows? That writer's grandmother is having a compassion, not only for human beings, but she was having compassionate nature towards the animals also, the pet animals also, the stray dogs also. This is a very important characteristic of the writer's grandmother, which impresses us. So make it sure. Soon the parents of the author who went to the city to settle in and call them. So what happens here? After some months, the writer's parents got settled and they called them, means the writer and the grandmother. As they reached the city, his relationship with his grandmother took a turn. Now when they were in a village, they were spending most of time with each other. But when they came in city, now their relationship took a turn. Though they shared a room, their bond grew apart. Now they were not spending time with one another. Actually, they shared one room, that was the solace. He started going to an English medium school. Now writer was admitted in an English medium school. She no longer accompanied him to school. Now, as they were city, used to go in a bus. So how can she accompany the writer to go to school? Grandmother could, and there were no longer stray dogs who roamed around them while walking back home. So when they were in village, the stray dogs would chase them, they would feed. But in city, everything has changed. She, however, used to ask him about his day. But still, after coming back from home, the grandmother would ask the writer about his day and what he had learned. She did not understand anything as everything was in another language. Now writer was learning in English language and she did not know anything. So there was a problem which she, of understanding. She didn't approve of the new syllabus. Now writer was taught science, mathematics and dance, music and all that. So grandmother did not like all these things because she thought that they did not teach him about God and scripture. Writer's grandmother was completely religious kind of lady. So she was against all these things. So she was not that much positive about writers learning a new subject of science, technology. She wanted that in schools, religion, God and scripture should be taught. They saw less of each other. So that is what happens. Now though they are living in a room, still their bonding and connection got little bit weaker here because their interest of studies were all that different now. Getting it? Let's move forward the next stage of their relationship. Now, as the days passed, he grew older and soon went to the university. Now, after the school education, for higher education, he was there in university. He had his own room. Now, he was provided a separate room, and this made their relationship sour. Now, in their childhood, they were spending almost all of their time together. But then when they shifted in city and he was in English medium school, they were spending less amount of time and all that. But here now, as he's going in college and university, now he was provided room. So here now there is a gap, and it happens in every household. As we go in upper classes university, the burden of the studies goes increasing, and that is why we are not that much attached with grandparents as much as we expected. She stopped talking to everyone now as she's becoming old also. So she generally doesn't talk with anyone in the house, and spent her whole day sitting at her spinning wheel. Spinning wheel, charkha, what is there? And there she was making a kind of cotton and all that there. And while doing that work, she would reciting prayers and moving beads of rosary with one hand. See here, she is keeping herself busy in work. In those time, pre-independence and all that, people were motivated and influenced by Gandhiji's Swadeshi, and that is why charkha was a symbol of self-dependence, and that is why she is working on that spinning wheel. And alongside that, instead of speaking anything else or gossiping, she is always pounding, moving the beads of rosary with one hand. It means always remembering the God, chanting the mantras or something like that. However, she loved feeding sparrows. But even in her busy schedule, what happens? She has a typical habit there. She loved feeding sparrows in the veranda at the dawn. You know, Sparrows would come and she used to feed them. Breaking bread into pieces and feeding it to the birds was her daily routine. The bird would sit on her legs, her head, and some even on her shoulder. So she would make the breadcrumbs into pieces and give to those sparrows. Now the sparrows would make a great crowd there, and they were become very much familiar to grandmother, that they were sitting on her lap, her legs, her head, and even her shoulder. What it shows? It shows that those sparrows had intimacy towards the grandmother. And on the other hand, as we have seen earlier also in village, the grandmothers used to feed the dogs, stray dogs. Here what she is doing, she is feeding these sparrows. So here we find that her love for birds is really great. She loves the human beings, but apart from that, she considers sparrows also as a human being and feeds them. And sparrows also feel connected and attached with the grandmother, as they feel that grandmother is somebody of their own. This is a very interesting phase here, isn't it? Soon the author decided to go abroad. Now what happens? After college education, he wanted to pursue his higher education. So he wanted to go abroad in a foreign country. Now in those days, as today there are very fast ways of communication, flights and everything. In those days, things were very different. Once you go abroad, you will come back after many years. So she was not happy because she was very much old, and she was not sure. Even writer was not sure when he would come back whether the grandmother would be alive or not. Because at that time the grandmother is almost 90 years old. And as the people are old, they are close to their death. So she was sad, but she didn't show her sadness. She came to the railway station to leave him off. She was not sentimental. Though she was inside and her mind was upset and sorry, but she didn't show that. And she's showing courage. Continuously recited her prayer. This is her self-balance. This is her patience. Her mind lost in the prayer. She's wishing and praying for her grandson and for his. So even though she is worried, she hides that worry and keeps praying God for the betterment of her grandson. And she kissed him on the forehead. She kisses the writer on his forehead, and there were the moist imprints. Writer carries those imprints for a long time. When writer went to abroad, he was not really sure that whether after 5 years, when he would be coming back, his grandmother would be there or not. Because after a certain age, you're not sure about life. But after 5 years, as he returned home, and grandmother was there, and see the happy thing here. She was there, came to pick him at the station, and once again, she came to pick him up and was still the same as she had been 5 years ago. She was exactly the same 5 years ago. She clasped him within her arms and didn't say a word. So she's hugging the writer, and that says everything. How much love and affection and proud she is of. She still used to feed her sparrows. But even while doing all these activities, she never neglected the sparrows and her duties towards them. One day, What happened? As after the writer returned, she wanted to celebrate it. Yes, she was very much happy. Generally, she was quiet of all these years. But as Khushwant Singh has come back from abroad and a foreign country with a new kind of degrees and achievement, she became happy. So instead of reciting her prayers, she collected the women of the neighborhood, got a drum and started singing. See, last 20 years, 25 years, writer had not seen his grandmother doing all these things. She was always busy in reciting the prayer, chanting the hymns and all that, and counting the beads of rosary. But now today, as the grandmother's joy knew no bound, what she's doing, she's calling the neighborhood women, and she's herself is beating the drum and singing. Everybody wanted that. Where from the energy she is generating? The answer is very simple. She was able to see her grandson once again, and the writer. And the next morning, what happened? As she stretched herself a lot after beating the drums and singing, the next morning she was ill with a mild fever. You know, she had never done this kind of such a energetic things and all that. So she has overstretched, over exertion. She had a mild fever. The doctor said that there was nothing to worry about, but she was sure that her end was near. Now, as she fell ill, the doctors came, doctors checked, and doctor told that there is nothing to worry. But mind in mind, the grandmother knew that her end is near. She didn't want to waste her time talking to anyone. Now, she has understood the real meaning of the life. Yes, she loved everyone, but apart from that, as she was influenced by religion and God, her duties towards God were great. That is why she did not talk with anyone of the family member, but spent her last hour in reciting her prayers, laying on the bed. So she was remembering, because after life or after death, God is the only one who is submission she is going to do. She died, and so her body lay on the bed, lifeless. As they prepared for her funeral, now her body was taken outside and was to be taken for funeral. While they were taking the grandma's body, suddenly they saw the sparrows sitting in the veranda around her, mourning her death. So what happens here? You know, here they are taking it. Now, when the grandma's body was taking, my dear children, remember that writer's mother, remember, actually nobody in the writer's house ate anything, but grandmother was very much interested in feeding the sparrows. So writer's mother went in the house, took some breadcrumbs and made available to the sparrows. But what happened? The next day, when the maid went in the room of the grandmother to just sweep, she found the breadcrumbs there. What happened there? The sparrows did not eat those breadcrumbs. Why they didn't eat? Because even the sparrows realized that the grandmother is no more, and now they were very much sorrowful at the death of grandmother. And on that day, the sparrows did not touch the food. This is how the writer's grandmother was. So, my dear student, here in this lecture, we have summarized the characteristic of the writer's grandmother, the different phases of their life, and whatever the phase of their life, how the grandmother and the writer's relationship went on. It was a very wonderful relationship. Therefore, I will appeal you that please spend some valuable time with your grandparents. Yes, they are the ones who love you more than what you expect. But in their old age, it is also your duty to spend time with them so that they can feel better and happy. So, dear students, this is all from my side. All the best to you. Stay home, stay safe.